Okay, thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members. Deborah Brown on behalf of State Superintendent of Public Instruction, Tom Torlakson. I'm going to provide a little bit of an update on the work that's happening to implement the new state standards. And then with me, I have Brent Malakote, who's our director of our Standards Implementation Office, and he can provide some more information about the work that the department is doing to help districts, to help support districts and educators implement the standards. So as everyone knows, in the late 1990s, we delved into the standards adoption, and throughout the later into the 90s and into the 2000s, we really did develop and update state standards around English language arts, math, history, social science, science, visual and performing arts, and world languages. And then in 2010, we underwent a revitalization of our standards with the adoption of the Common Core state standards in English language arts and math, and then it followed that 3 years later with the adoption of the next generation science standards. And so in a really short period of time, we significantly changed the expectations in those three core subjects. And not only did this require new instructional materials, new professional development, but they really did represent significant instructional shifts that were fundamental to the new standards, which were really focused around college and career readiness, improving critical thinking and problem solving skills, and really building a deeper understanding of the content. And so these shifts were around regularly using complex texts and using and having students read, write, and speak with evidence that grounded in evidence from the text, really around coherence of thinking across grades and linking major topics within grades. And in the nearly 6 years since Common Core was adopted, California has taken significant steps to provide resources for schools that have ranged from providing guides on the new standards, developing frameworks that integrate English language arts and English language development, and in between. The instructional materials list has been approved by the State Board of Education, and professional development modules have also been adopted. More recently, with the next generation science standards, we are in the middle of implementing a plan, and working on developing the framework for NGSS that will be adopted by the State Board in January. And some of the other work around the plan is really around facilitating high quality professional development learning opportunities for educators, providing NGSS-aligned resources, developing and transition to aligned assessments, collaborating with parents around early learning and expanded opportunities, collaborating with post-secondary and business communities, and building coalitions around a consistent message to sustain momentum during the implementation. As the analysis notes, the cost to implement NGSS is fairly significant, and that analysis, nearly $1 billion, is really around what it would take to get classrooms up to speed and have them ready for the new standards. So it was really around lab and materials. There are additional costs associated with implementing NGSS, and that would be around professional development, other instructional materials. So it's rather a significant but important investment that California can make. Building on what the state has provided in terms of resources, there's obviously the provision in LCFF that one of the state priorities around the use of LCFF dollars is the implementation of state standards, and so districts are using their LCFF resources for that. But because we have made the significant transition, and there really is a requirement for a need for really an infusion of resources to help get not only districts to develop the foundations for the new standards, but also because we had really disinvested in instructional materials and professional development during the recession when we cut support for those programs. And so in 2013, the state did provide $1.25 billion for districts to utilize for professional development. And in December, this past December, we did provide a report on how districts spent those dollars, and so we could really see within buckets around how they spent that dollars for standards implementation. And so we see that a fair amount of the districts spent it, nearly $600 million on technology capabilities and really building up their infrastructure. An additional $385 million was spent on professional learning, with most of that going towards math and English language arts professional learning. Just over, not quite 703,000 teachers, administrators, and paraprofessionals received professional learning with these funds, and so this would include release time for educators as well as external providers. And then another $351 million was spent on instructional materials. Additionally, the budget last year provided $490 million for educator effectiveness, and within that, districts could use those dollars for professional development for teachers and administrators in the state contact standards, and districts are required to report to the department by July 1st, 2018 on how they use those dollars. And so we'll, in a couple of years, be able to have a better sense of how those dollars were allocated. I would also say that while standards implementation is really a locally driven process, but there is state support and resources that we can provide, not only in terms of dollars, but also support for districts to really help schools build capacity for their educators. And with that, I'll turn it over to Brent Mallicott to talk a little bit more about the work that the department is doing to support districts.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Brent Mallicott. I'm the Standards Support Director at the California Department of Education. I just wanted to take a few minutes to talk to you about some of the things that we know about standards implementation in the state of California right now, and then also talk about a few things that are going on, kind of a high-level view of some of the supports that are being provided for that implementation. Through ongoing conversations with education stakeholders across the state and recently confirmed at the March State Board of Education meeting with the Standards Implementation Survey report done by WestEd, we have some important takeaways regarding standards implementation. It is important to recognize first that there is continuing goodwill towards the standards among teachers, principals, and district leadership. Educators state that the current standards are more rigorous than previous standards, and that the standards will positively impact the degree to which students prepare for college and career. Some of the key findings for California's standards implementation include the need to provide knowledge and capacity building around the California standards for school leaders. We know that early on, the much of the targeted support went to the classroom teacher, which is the right place for that support to be given early, but now it's time to catch up with principals and school leaders. We know that there's a need for additional structured time to learn and implement the standards-based practices for teachers. And this comes into play. We were just hearing about the teacher shortage, and many schools use substitute teachers to help build that capacity by having teachers released out of their classroom for the day, and a substitute teacher would come in to help give that coverage. But as teachers are being hired, there are less substitute teachers, and so there's less of that opportunity. We know there's a need for more quality standards-aligned instructional materials, and that came from the WestEd survey. However, the WestEd survey was completed in the fall of 2015, and that was right at about the same time that we know that the language arts curriculum was approved by the state board, and so we're starting to see some relief in that area as well, especially in language arts and English language development. And we also know that districts are implementing standards in different ways and on different timelines. We often see kind of pilot programs going on where the standards will be, this implementation process will happen in grade level bands or sometimes in subject areas. And again, with pilots being a main way for that to happen. There are several supports that are going on at the state level. First of all, the creation of the California Department of Education Standards Support Office, which I was hired in January to direct. We've got a lot of great work going on both in the department, creating those coalitions, really working on that constant line of communication that's coming from the department, and being able to work with all the branches and divisions when it comes to standards. We're also really focusing on spotlighting some of the really terrific work that's happening in schools across the state and making sure that we're communicating that out to other schools so that they can use some of those same strategies. And we're also working collaboratively and supporting coalitions outside of the State Department. One of those includes a standards steering committee, which is a collaborative effort that's going on between the California Department of Ed, the State Board of Education, and the county superintendents, or CSESA. And we've got some terrific work happening there, and we're working on a strategic plan using content-specific subject area experts and using their advice and creating a plan for the state moving forward to continue that successful implementation. We've got some really terrific rollouts, framework rollouts. Each of the subject areas have frameworks to help teachers dive more deeply and administrators dive more deeply into the work that is expected in each of the subject areas. And we're having regional trainings that are going out. And the idea is that we're not only training the people that are in attendance at these rollout trainings, but that we're building capacity at those regional levels and at the county offices so that they can continue that work going forward. And then finally, we've got a lot of great resources on our website. I brought a series of parent brochures that we've really been working on and trying to get out to the state to make sure that parents are aware of the work that's going on in the different subject areas around math, language, arts, and again, these are on the CDE website. But I'd be happy to pass these out so you can take a look at one of the resources that's available. Be happy to take any questions.
Okay, any questions? Thank you. This is informational item. Next issue. Issue 5, funding for the Exploratorium. This is a place I went on a field trip in 4th grade? Probably, right?
Good afternoon, Amber Alexander with the Department of Finance. The governor's budget appropriates $3.5 million in ongoing Proposition 98 general fund to the San Francisco Unified School District for support of the Exploratorium in San Francisco. These funds will be used by the Exploratorium to support both in-person and online professional development and leadership training programs for education professionals, programs that expand science, technology, engineering, and math education across the state, and programs that support districts in implementing and strengthening their standards-based school and district science programs. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay. LAO?
Ryan Anderson, Legislative Analyst Office. We're recommending that you reject this proposal. This recommendation is made without prejudice to the Exploratorium. Our understanding is that they are engaged in a lot of these professional development activities that a lot of districts are making use of right now. Really, we have two concerns with this proposal. First is just that it goes against the grain of the state's broader strategy for school finance reform, where recent years we've been cutting the strings on state funding, giving local districts more control over how education dollars are funded. This seems more like the old system where we're dedicating funds to a specific entity for a specific purpose, categorical program, and we're not clear that there's a rationale for going against the state's broader strategy. Our second concern just revolves around the transparency of the governor's approach. This funding is provided under the governor's proposal as what's known as an LCFF add-on for the San Francisco Unified School District, which then passes it on to the Exploratorium. Because this is an add-on, it would appear in state law, it would be buried in education code, would not be in the annual budget. Funding would basically be on autopilot, and we think this doesn't give the legislature enough opportunity to really discuss and review this spending. So we think if funding is provided to the Exploratorium, that it should be provided in the Annual Budget Act, and this would be consistent with how the state has provided the support in previous years.
Okay. Department of Education.
Deborah Brown on behalf of State Superintendent of Public Instruction Tom Torlakson. We don't have a position on the funding for the Exploratorium, but I would say that we do welcome a partnership with the Exploratorium, regardless of whether funding is provided or not. We definitely think any high quality training is useful to teachers and students in California and can certainly extend the reach of any training. We would say that it's important to align out of school learning with state standards, and therefore would recommend the Exploratorium team, who would be conducting the training to have attended or planned to attend the Next Generation Science Standards rollout, and our NGSS leadership team, consisting of several outside agencies, conducts thoroughly vetted presentations based on consensus of understanding of the nuances of the standards, and so we would be open to that.
Okay. Thank you. I have two questions for this. One is just kind of a policy question, and one is the kind of financial piece. Just overall, of course, this is in San Francisco, and 2/3 of the state is in Southern California, including representatives on the committee over here. And so, if you really wanted to help teachers work in this field, wouldn't you have maybe two of these? Maybe you do something in the Bay Area, maybe Southern California, maybe in the Central Valley. It just seems, I guess people could come up here, but that seems pretty cost prohibitive. I guess
maybe we could do the other one at Magic Mountain.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry.
Isn't there a big aquarium in Long Beach? You could do some science project there.
That might be slightly more educational based. You're correct.
Okay.
And
then
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. I just had to.
That's okay.
There.
So you can put that question aside for a second. And the second question is wonder if you could respond to the LAO financial issue as far as how it goes to the district and not directly to the entity, and how that jives with Prop 98.
Sure. I'll go ahead and address your first question first and then follow up with the second. The Exploratorium was first designated as a regional resource science center for the state in 1984. They have received state funding to develop programs and perform professional development activities in the past. Most recently, 2002 Budget Act included funding for that purpose. Given that the Exploratorium has a long history of having a statewide impact, they do free field trips for all Title I schools throughout the state, as well as a number of professional development workshops in districts throughout the state, not just in the San Francisco area. Given that they have a history of having a statewide impact, we felt that they were perfectly positioned to help us as a state as we roll out that next generation science standards.
So how will they help with teachers in the south of the Tehachapi's, where that's roughly 2/3 of our state teacher workforce?
The Exploratorium has actually already begun contacting county offices of education to find out specific needs that those districts may have. In addition, as I mentioned, they do district-based workshops now, and it's our hope that with this funding they can expand those offerings so that they can reach more areas of the state. Additionally, they do provide stipends to get teachers to the Exploratorium in San Francisco to make that initial point of contact, and then continue that contact as they go back to their districts for additional support as needed.
Okay, and then you want to address the financial issue
Sure.
that the LAO raised. It was also in our analysis.
Sure. Well, it's certainly our preference to continue to put money out on a flexible basis consistent with LCFF. That doesn't preclude the administration's ability from making one-time investments from time to time as we feel is necessary. We heard in the previous panel about the need to provide additional professional development, specifically in the areas of science and math for teachers. There's also been a number of studies emphasizing that science should become a state priority and that more support is needed as we move towards implementing these standards. Given those findings and what we've been hearing from the field, we feel that additional targeted investment in this area is warranted.
Okay, thank you. Mr. O'Donnell?
I think you heard my opinion already, Mr. Chair. I don't know if this is good policy, and I think the LAO pointed out a few things. Maybe they could go over them again, if you would. Just the use of Prop 98 funds for something like this is a little curious.
Sure. So the agenda that was passed out for today notes some concerns about whether this would be an appropriate use of Proposition 98 funding. We actually don't have a position on that question. We would point out that a judicial precedent has given the legislature pretty wide discretion on what they can classify as Proposition 98. And it's very possible that this would be an appropriate use under those precedents, but we think that there's sufficient policy rationale for not approving this expenditure that those are the points we'd really like to emphasize.
Great. So in essence, what we'd be doing is giving San Francisco Unified $3.5 million to then give to this other entity.
That's correct.
Correct, which is a rather unusual budget maneuver, I assume. Right. Yeah. To be honest with you, I thought this was a joke when I first looked at it. I mean, I don't know. This to me is not something the committee should support, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Irwin?
Yeah. So the money is going to San Francisco Unified. What % of the professional development is San Francisco Unified teachers? Because you just stated that this is supposed to be used for really as a regional center.
Statewide, yes, a statewide impact. I don't believe that there is a specific percentage of the $3.5 million that's set aside for any particular group of teachers. The funding is to go to the Exploratorium, who will then develop programs, do additional outreach. A number of their resources are also online, web-based. And so it's the intention that the funds would be used to have a statewide impact to provide more professional development to science and math teachers throughout various regions of the state.
But it's all being funneled through San Francisco Unified.
Yes, given the geographical location of the Exploratorium in San Francisco, we felt that that was an appropriate entity to pass the money through. We'd note that this is not a unique approach. Prior budgets have included similar pass-throughs, most recently through the Los Angeles County Office of Ed for the Museum of Tolerance in LA.
Mr. O'Donnell?
Just one more question. How many curriculum experts does the Exploratorium have on staff?
I would have to get back to you on their staffing level.
Right. With specifically with regard to the curriculum specialists.
Sure.
That's what they would be doing, right?
Yes, and I would note that they also do partner with various nonprofits and higher education agencies throughout the state in developing their programs. But I'd be happy to get that information.
But again, this is not for them to develop their program. This is for them to develop a program for teachers.
The Exploratorium, it would be professional.
Is this going? So I guess, are they focused on what's happening inside the Exploratorium? Or are they focused on what's going to happen across California?
It is statewide. Some of that would be developing additional programs that are offered at the Exploratorium. Again, I mentioned they bring teachers from districts throughout the state. They provide stipends to get those teachers to the Exploratorium for some of their workshops and professional development activities that are offered there. So the trailer bill language that we've crafted is broad in that it's for professional development activities. So that could be either in the district-based, which they do offer district-based workshops, or at the Exploratorium itself.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. We will hold this item open. Good questions. Next issue, state assessments. Department of Finance.
Amber Alexander with the Department of Finance. The governor's budget includes $110 million in Proposition 98 General Fund and $24 million in federal Title VI funds to cover costs for statewide student assessments in 2016-17. We've worked closely with the State Department of Education to ensure that the amounts budgeted align to their 16-17 estimates for student assessment costs. I'll now turn it over to the department, who'll provide an overview of the various assessments and the work they'll be undertaking in the budget year with this. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Deborah Brown on behalf of State Superintendent of Public Instruction, Tom Torlakson. So I'll provide an update on some of the activities that have been underway, as well as some of the planned activities in the coming years to really implement the new CAST system, as well as some updates on some other assessments. And so I'll talk about the smarter balanced assessments, the work happening on the assessment for NGSS, the new assessments, some of the recommendations that the superintendent has made, and then give an update on the KC. So covering quite a bit of content. So the smarter balanced assessments are really there's two components to the assessments. So there's the interim assessments, and so those are ones that are local options that the state makes them available, and districts can choose to implement to utilize them to assess their students. And so, and all K-12 students are eligible to take the assessments, and the window for taking those assessments opened in August, and it goes through July of 2016. And as of about a week and a half ago, 4.4 million interim assessments have been administered, and so that's in English, language arts, and math. The testing window for the administration of the summative assessment, so that's for students in grades 3 through 8 as well as grade 11, is going on now. And I think we reported yesterday that we're in the sort of the biggest bubble of when most kids are taking the assessments now. And so the testing window is really determined by the LEAs when they reach a minimum percentage of their instructional days. In 2016, 15-16, districts could establish shorter testing windows, but they had to be at least 25 instructional days. From mid-January to mid-April, the number of assessments that have been completed so far in English, language arts, and math is about 924,000, and in English, language arts, and in math that number's not quite 510,000. There are currently about 1,580 students in 17 LEAs that are using the paper pencil test, and so that was allowed for 3 years, and this is the second year which they can take the paper pencil test. And approximately 37% of the districts have started their summative assessments. We have found that in the overall, the implementation of these computer-based assessments has been relatively smooth. We've been making adjustments and changes along the way based on feedback from LEAs. We've added new reports to the system in an effort to provide task coordinators and test site coordinators with current information on how the administration is progressing for their district and school. And overall feedback, some schools and districts are experiencing some minor local challenges, and our contractor is assisting districts in troubleshooting some of those. We've also implemented a new online security and test administration incident reporting process for LEAs to report any testing issues that they may have. And then on the the development of the assessment that's aligned to the next generation science standards. So students are still in grades 5, 8, and 10 are still taking the assessments aligned to the old standards, but work is underway to develop a assessment aligned to the next generation science standards. And so in last month, the state board approved the grades for which the new science assessments would be given. And so that's grades 5, 8, and then 10, 11, or 12. And the summative tests would be aligned to the new standards, are under development, and the plan is to have those pilot tested next spring, field tested in the spring of 2018, and then fully operational in the spring of 2019. Work on the new assessment. So there's the primary language assessment, and in late April, the department, in collaboration with our contractor educational testing service, is convening a meeting with the new primary language assessment design team, including 3 national experts, to attain input in the development of the high-level test design. And the test design will include the purposes for the primary language assessment, and it will be submitted to the State Board of Education for approval in July. And once that's approved, the new test development can begin. And the expectation is the pilot testing will occur again next fall, 2017. The special education or the alternative assessment, the computer-based one-on-one assessment of English language arts and literacy and mathematics. It would be given to eligible students in grades 3 through grade 11. Students with IEPs would determine when a child with a significant cognitive disabilities would participate in the alternative assessment. Approximately 37,000 students will take the alternative assessment in 2016, and the scores will be reported in this fall. The new English language proficiency assessment transition timeline. So to date, the development of the new proficiency assessment is on time and on budget, and the summative assessment will be operational in spring 2018. And so we're work towards moving towards a computer-based assessment. We're trying to prepare a transition plan to a computer-based assessment for the LPAC. And we're working with the contractor to conduct an evidence-based analysis of the considerations and issues involved in moving to an online platform. Potential solutions will be studied and recommendations will be established. We're also collaborating with WestEd's Comprehensive Center for Technical Assistance on best practices in transitioning to a computer-based assessment.
Okay, thank you. LAO?
Edgar Cabral with the LAO. We don't actually have anything to add. I think we just know that some of these numbers might change and may revision. At that point, we'll let you know if we have any specific concerns.